Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about Dylan Laube, a New Hampshire running back based on his production, athleticism, and other statistical factors. So we're going to look at all of his data to kind of see how he projects at the NFL level, who he compares to, all those different kinds of things. So the first place you have to look at is offensive market share production data. If you're new to the channel, you can pause the video here. But offensive market share data is essentially a how much of the offense did this player make up in terms of, their total offensive data, receiving, touchdown, areas, all those different kinds of things. And when you look at his data, he had 87 percentile total offensive market share production score. He also had a 91 percentile receiving market share production score and a 76 percentile in terms of his touchdown market share production score. Those numbers are decent, but again, remember, he didn't play in the FBS. He played in the lower level division. So these production scores are a little skewed because if he was at Georgia or the SEC, would he put up these same types of numbers? Probably not. So that's one of the question marks you always have when it comes to lower level division running backs. Now, when you get to his efficiency scores, this is another area where he did relatively well in certain areas, but not well in other areas. His TD percentage was above average. His receiving or yards per reception score was also above average, but his touch average or yards per touch was below average. So that's a bit of a concern, guys. If you have a guy coming from lower level division and his yards per touch is below average, that's a little bit of a concern. You would expect them to be putting up crazy yards per touch at that level, and he wasn't. So that's just is what it is there. Now, when you get to his athleticism traits, based on athleticism, he had a 63 percentile explosion score, 54 percentile in terms of speed, and 87.95 in terms of flexibility for his size. These are good numbers for a running back. He has essentially Pro Bowl athleticism in terms of his flexibility score, because the vast majority of Pro Bowl running backs had at least one 78 percentile athleticism trait, whether it was explosiveness, speed, or flexibility. So this is good. This is a good number for him to have. And in many ways, his profile, athletically speaking, is similar to Christian McCaffrey. Not quite as flexible or as fast as Christian McCaffrey, but similar athleticism in terms of the traits that they have. They share a similar trait of being kind of above average explosive but not elite, above average fast but not elite in terms of speed, but elite in terms of flexibility traits, short shuttle, three cone, those types of things. Now, when you get to his adjusted production score, this is where things get a little scary for him, because when you look at his adjusted production, he was 52 percentile in terms of his age, 56 percentile in terms of his MSA rating, and then 42 percentile in terms of his pass rating. A lot of this is because of his level of competition, and when you talk about smaller school backs, this is what you're going to run into a lot. You're going to run into this issue here. So you typically want lower level division running backs, or any player for that matter, to be younger. You expect them to have 90 plus percentile production across the board, and you also expect them to test well as an athlete. He's done at least a handful of those things here and there. His market share production is good. His athleticism is good. But this is definitely a concern because he's not really hitting out of the box in every single number, especially when it comes to his age and other factors like that. Now, when you get to comparisons for him, so these are some pro comparisons based on his data. So looking at his market share data, his efficiency data, age, MSA, pass, athleticism traits, everything that we just looked at. These are the backs that kind of tested similar to him based on all these traits. And most of them are backups. There's a handful of starters here and there. A lot of these starters are from a long time ago, like the 70s and the 80s. But this is kind of what you're expecting to get out of a guy like Dylan Laube. So that's the concerns with him in terms of those particular things. Now, when you look at his outlook, I would say Dylan profiles as a backup to outlier starter long term. The biggest weakness in his profile is his age and level of competition. Non-FBS running backs have an even harder and lower hit rate than FBS prospects for a variety of reasons. One is politics. A lot of times teams are not going to waste time with their scouting department scouting lower level division players. A lot of times the only real scouting they have of these types of players is at the bowl games, at the Senior Bowl, and the Shrine Game, and these other sort of things. So they're not always keyed into the small school prospects just from a resources standpoint. And why are you watching film on lower level division prospects when the vast majority of them are going to not make it in the NFL compared to FBS competition? I mean, you're going to find more NFL starters looking at the FBS than you are the FCS, and that's just the way it is. It definitely is a political thing because you're not really giving a shot to guys at that level because of those issues that I just mentioned, but it just is what it is. So I think that's kind of an issue for him. Overall, though, I like his profile. The athleticism is definitely there. The production traits are definitely there to a certain extent, except for the efficiency scores. And I'm excited to see what happens with him. I think he does have the baseline traits to be a starter, but if he does become a starter, he will most likely be an outlier. And not even most likely, he just is going to be an outlier if he becomes a starter based on his data. So with all that stuff out of the way, let me remind you guys to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, check out my other information on patreon.com/jcoburn. Consider becoming a patron. I'm going to be releasing the NFL Draft Analytics Guide pretty soon. And when that comes out, probably back in, I would say August is the date, is kind of the month I'm going to be dropping it. But that's going to be available to starter level patrons. So if you like this content, you want to see a lot of the class, the draft class based on data, definitely consider buying that in the future or becoming a patron. Also, follow my Twitter account, which is, or I should say X account, @Geometrics. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.